The History of Video Games presents The Lost Arcade is a pop-up event which has happened in Bristol. The story behind it is that building workers who are renovating an old dock building in Bristol have stumbled across what is thought to be a lost video game arcade, containing a bumper haul of vintage arcade games from the 1970s, 80s and 90s. And upon finding this haul, the developers for the scheme called in the History of Video Games team. This team was called in firstly to see if the games would work, then get them cleaned up and back in use, and then create an event for them in Bristol. And this is that event in question that you can see here. The History of Video Games presents The Lost Arcade. It's an all-you-can-play video game event, so you just pay to get in, and then all the video games are free, no coins required. The developers say this will probably be the UK's biggest retro arcade. So being someone that was actually old enough to remember going to these types of arcades in the 80s and 90s, and also being somewhat of a arcade connoisseur myself, I thought I'd check the place out. So I popped down there yesterday for one of their afternoon sessions along with my mate Tom to see what classic games they had on offer. Let's take a look. And, oh yeah, the whole bit about the lost arcade games being discovered is just a story, by the way. Just a fun little bit of embellishment to go with the event created by the History of Arcade Games team. What you can't really tell here, because my video isn't picking up brilliantly, is that the screen in this Space Invaders cabinet is actually being reflected backwards onto a mirror, which has got some really groovy looking 2D artwork drawn on it. all of the authentic 1980s tunes playing in the background was a really nice touch as well. I really hope they don't cause a third-party content strike here though. So as well as vintage arcade games, there were also some vintage consoles on offer as well. I wholeheartedly approve of the use of Sega Rally on the Sega Saturn there guys, good choice. You probably noticed a bit earlier in the video as well, the SNES Mini that was hooked up to a large screen TV. This is a slice of real old school Sega arcade gaming here, Carnival, which came out in 1980. It holds the distinction of being the first arcade game that ever featured a bonus round. So all in all, the visit to the Lost Arcade was really good fun. The ticket price is £12 with a £1.50 booking fee, so that's £13.50 for 3 hours of solid arcade gameplay fun, which I think is pretty reasonable. One thing that I would just mention, and it's not a criticism as such, but there were a few surprising notable omissions of some of my favourite titles. Games like Outrun, R-Type, Shinobi, Raiden, Chase HQ, Super Hang-On and Daytona USA. But there was a lot of other cool stuff there. But I guess the emphasis was on Lost Arcade, not Alex's favourite arcade games. And there were some truly vintage games on display here, things that I've never ever seen in an arcade before. Games like Popeye, the original Mario Bros and Burger Time. And I have to say, being back in a proper vintage style arcade like this really was quite an amazing nostalgia trip. Although to be honest, none of the arcades that I ever went to when I was a kid ever actually had as many games as this. The only thing it was really missing for that true 1980s authentic arcade experience was a sticky carpet, a haze of stale cigarette smoke hanging around in the atmosphere, and a pimply, bum-fluff mustachioed 14-year-old, who may or may not possess a flick knife, hanging around the Street Fighter II cabinet, giving me the sort of terrifying glances from time to time, like at any second he's going to come over and rob me at knife point and steal all my bastarding pocket money. You all know the sort of turbo douche I'm talking about. Man, the 80s were great, weren't they? And I do mean that, genuinely though. That slight fear of what local teenage nutters you might bump into at the local arcade was oddly enough something that actually enhanced the experience. And in its own strange sort of way is something that contributes to all the happy memories of going to places like this now. Anyway, the point I was trying to make there was about nostalgia, and this place provides just the perfect hit of that. I'm not sure how much longer it's going to be going on for, but if you live around the local area of Bristol or in the southwest of England, it's definitely worth popping in and checking it out. So anyway, I'm going to wrap things up there. If you've enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like, share and subscribe. These things are really important nowadays for smaller YouTube channels like mine. After the changes in the YouTube algorithm that I've heard about through other YouTube channels, which are suggesting that now the algorithm tends to favour bigger corporations like Disney in terms of trying to get them more views. Wankers. Anyway, if you're a fan of old school Sega arcade games, please do check out some of the documentary style videos I've made featuring some of their most famous games from the 1980s and 1990s. I'll add some links to them here at the end of the video. So, this is Mr. Thunderwing signing out. Take care everyone, and see you again soon. Bye bye.